Still going in there, bro. Get out!
Mike, pick it up, Mike.
Good, Donnie.
Down here, all right?
I got this. Go slow.
The dust is starting to settle. Just tell them to go slow.
I'm going to work right now on the appointment, but I'll be right back. All right, you going to stay with him? You're going to stay with him? Work with him. Stay with me. Okay, I'll double back. All right. No idea. Close your eyes, I got you. Oh my God.
Which way to go?
Just stay put. Stay put.
Where are we?
Chopper
You're in
5,
front of
chopper
St. Paul's
5 on
Church
3.
on Fulton and Broadway.
Which way to go?
Stay right where you are.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
And Eddie Carr joined us this morning to talk about that.
I tried to deliver words that were succinct, that did not invite a question, and told the president of the severity of the challenge. So I said a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. That's all I said.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We're looking at a live picture from Washington, and there is smoke pouring out the Pentagon. It would appear that there has been another major explosion. This was the nation's capital.
This was, in fact, the day that changed the world. It was.
Yep.
A lot of times when we look at this event, I think we look at this as an isolated event. We look at 9/11 and we say, how did the towers come down? How did Building 7 come down? Did our government lie to us? I think all those questions have been answered without any shadow of a doubt. The technology, the internet, things have evolved so much. Really, in the past few years, we have seen research come out that has left that debate answered. There's no question about it. Architects for Truth, Architects and Engineers for Truth, 9/11, those guys have done incredible work and have completely debunked this conspiracy theory that the government gave us. That was the conspiracy theory. That was the irrational thing to believe in. Everyone on the ground that day said that it came down by bombs. Yet people will say that later on, if we all agree with that narrative, if we believe the eyewitness accounts and we believe the first responders that all said that there was bombs in the building, if we believe them, somehow or another, we are the crazy people. But to believe that somehow or another jet fuel can be very meticulously guided down an intricate set of elevator shafts and find its way to a basement and explode an entire building in perfect sequence to a controlled demolition, and not just do it once, but do it 3 times. One of the buildings wasn't even hit by a plane. We're supposed to believe these things. It's absolutely genius, though, that finally all of the evidence has been put forth that we can say, hey, this is all nonsense. We don't have to believe this. The facts are here. The facts have arrived. This would stand up in court if it was ever possible to have a court that would, of course, look at this, but that never will happen. So I am not going to, tonight, I'm not going to pretend that we're going to put forth any evidence that you guys have likely not already seen. I believe that the majority of people that are viewing our channel are probably truthers yourself. You guys have been researching this for a very long time. What I would like to discuss more is something that does not get covered quite as often, is the why and the repercussions of this event, because this changed the world. This did not just change America. Yes, it was impactful on America in every way possible. Thousands of people died that day. Millions have died since in the Middle East. We have devastated governments. We have overturned regimes. Thousands of U.S. soldiers, millions of Middle Easterners have lost everything that they've ever lived for, everything that they worked hard for. They've lost their daughters, their sons. People have died. This is a huge event. And so if we know that 9/11 was a lie, we know that everything we were told about that day was a bold-faced lie. What that leaves us is a lot of damn questions. That's what that leaves us with. I want to tell you what I experienced today. Not to pound my own chest, but I want to just show you how devastating this can be to somebody that just comes across this information. I usually don't work with people at work. Typically, when I'm at work, I don't really have somebody that is working with me. I work almost always by myself, but today was 9/11 and I had a young guy, he's in his 20s, and he was working with me today because the work that I had to do required 2 people. And of course my mind today is on 9/11. That's what my mind's been on all day long. And he knew that I like to study history. He knew that I like to just study things in general. And so he asked me, he's like, well, what's your take on 9/11? I said, oh man, do I have a story for you. So I bring him down the path and I say, look, man, I asked him, I said, have you ever heard of World Trade, of the Building 7? Did you know that there was a 3rd tower that came down in 9/11? Of course not. He had no idea. I said, well, let me tell you a little bit about it. And I started walking him through the series of events, and I showed him some videos of architects and engineers for, Truth for 9/11 or 9/11 Truth. And I showed him some of that material, and he was flabbergasted. He said, wow, man, I had no idea. And I said, yeah, these are the laws of physics, right? The laws of physics still apply, don't they? I mean, we still live on planet Earth, don't we? These are basics. This is basic science. And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So after we get through the idea, he says, wow, dude, I can't believe this. I was lied to. Everything that I was taught in school about 9/11 was a complete lie, every bit of it. And I said, yes, it was. I said, now what kind of questions does that leave open for you? The war in Iraq? Weapons of mass destruction? Was that all a hoax? Because we have audio evidence of Dick Cheney saying that we had absolutely no evidence to support the idea that Osama bin Laden had anything to do with 9/11. Many of you may not have known that. So we'll get into some of this tonight. But what I want to talk about is the why, the who, and then the repercussions of 9/11. I'm assuming that a lot of you have probably already done your investigation, have probably come to the conclusion that, of course, 9/11, the buildings came down by controlled demolition. There's really no other way this could have happened, right? There's no other way. So I'm not here by myself tonight. Cliff, I'm sorry I've taken so much time, man. I want to say hello to you. How are you?
All good here, mate. Yep. It's it's certainly an interesting time, not just Americans, but everyone around the world is focused on 9/11 when this date comes up.
Yes.
So from a New Zealand perspective, of course, most people would believe it. There are obviously conspiracy theorists here, but even looking at that video again that you just put before we came on, it looks convincing to the average person that watches the media. A big part of the building's falling down onto another part of the building, and you'd
Mhm.
think it'd make a bit of a mess. You'd think that it would cause a bit of destruction, but it's just the fluidity at which that building's falling.
It,
It's
it
just smooth fall.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, scientifically speaking, it falls literally at free fall speeds. Okay, so we can look at the laws of physics and say that if something falls at free fall speed completely from top to bottom, as if you took any object and just dropped it, if there's any resistance under it whatsoever, any resistance, then it's not going to fall at free fall speed. Free fall speed means that there's literally no resistance under it. So just that fact alone debunks the whole idea that you could have even had a bomb at the base of the structure. Even if you had could say, well, somebody drove a van under the very base of the structure and blew out the foundation of the building, you would still have a huge portion of the building that would be there to create some resistance. The fact that the top, the entire building, all three buildings, now the World Trade Centers, they fell within a fraction of a second of free fall speed. Building 7 literally fell at free fall speed. So, I mean, so small, such a small amount of time off that it's not even worth really mentioning. You might as well say that they're all at free fall speed. But if the buildings had any kind of resistance under them, and we believe that, and if we want to follow the pancake theory, it would have taken a long time for the building to actually fall down. It wouldn't have happened within a matter of 9 to 10 seconds. I mean, that's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, I mean that's the most obvious thing, and what really convinced me that that's obviously something going on there is there's a lot of videos out there where people are making comparisons with demolitions of other buildings,
Sure.
and so it's right there. They're saying there's a demolition,
Yeah.
there's the World Trade Center, there's
And
yeah.
And the astonishing thing about that is that it didn't happen that way just once. It wasn't just building 7 that happened that way. You can take that framework and apply it to all of the buildings and say, look, all 3 of them fell exactly the same. I mean, what are the odds of that happening, that all 3 buildings would have this incredibly confined and neat fall like that? Now, of course, at the time, we just didn't, we just believed the story, right? I say we, not everybody. I did. And everyone in my immediate surroundings believed the story, but I was still in high school. I really didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah. I was working for myself even at that stage. I was about, how old would I have been then? Probably about 28, and I was, I worked from home. So, and I remember we had a guy living with us and he wasn't really working and he was just watching it all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that much about it. I knew there was something weird going on in the world, but I didn't know as much as we know now. And it was definitely convincing. It was, but everyone was saying, "Oh, it's World War III. This is serious." It was hard to sort of absorb the impact of it.
I don't think it's even so much war as it is United States basically becoming terrorist of the Middle East. And as we get into this, we'll find out. I mean, it's, when you look at the war in Iraq, and there's an entire documentary on that, just that alone. Who was it that did the dang documentary? Brave New Films put out a documentary, and here we have guys that worked for the CIA, just high ups. I'll just say that you need to go watch it. I'll try to find it later. Once we get to the public, I'll post this for you. But what you need to understand is you have people that was running the show. They worked for the CIA, the FBI. They were, in the military at the time, just, special ops, whatever. And these were all 30 plus year guys. These guys were the very people orchestrating all of this stuff and doing all of it. And they're coming out and exposing what the war in Iraq really was. And what we find out is that a day after 9/11, the conversation was literally, why there's no good targets in Afghanistan. There's no good targets in Afghanistan. We should take this opportunity to go to war with Iraq. That's what we should do here, because there's good targets in Iraq. Okay. Now,
and Saddam Hussein's a bad man.
Right. And look, I've got a clip I want to show. Let me pull this up. Cliff, I realize that there's going to be some latency here for you. What this is going to be, this will show you that this narrative was in play long before before 9/11. This is something that they've had in plan for a long time. Here is 1990. This is Benjamin Netanyahu talking about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And so he's already setting the stage long before this. Okay, so he's already campaigning for this. Now, how many times have we seen Israel push U.S. into war? In fact, it was Israel that gave us the intel that told us that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to begin with. Now, much later down the road, we all now know that there were never, of course, any weapons of mass destruction in Israel. And furthermore, they knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction. I mean, in Iraq. Hell, there's plenty of weapons of mass destruction in Israel. Anyways, I'm going to transition over here. Let's take a look at this clip. Let's watch it together.
Peacefully, so much the better.
You say you don't want to talk of war, but no less than Shimon Peres has said that the appearance is that Israel is trying to push the United States into war. And there's a report out of Jerusalem that Israel is demanding a commitment from the United States that America put an end to the Iraqi military threat.
I don't know about these reports. I do know what our policy is. We share, in fact, the policy with the United States. Because, you see, what is threatened by Iraq is not just Israel. Everybody is threatened by Iraq. If Saddam Hussein maintains, if he devours that prey and keeps it, he will go after other prey. If he gets out of Kuwait but remains with his war machine intact, who can say that tomorrow or a year or two from now, he won't turn on some other target? It may not be Israel. It may be somebody else in the region. It could be Turkey. It could be Saudi Arabia again. It could be anyone. So the question is really, how do we neutralize the threat posed by this vast war machine that Iraq has in the wake of the Gulf crisis?
Are you denying that Foreign Minister Levy translated a message to U.S. Ambassador Brown that in effect asked for a U.S. commitment to end the Iraqi military threat?
Well, I don't get into diplomatic conversations, but I think I've stated our policy, and I think it's very much your policy. That is, the question is really, how do we ensure that these weapons of destruction, these missiles, these chemical weapons, the nuclear program that is fast accelerating in Iraq, that these do not pose a threat in the aftermath of the crisis, assuming he gets out of Kuwait. This is an issue for the entire international community. And again, if this can be done by peaceful means, we support it.
How concerned are you, sir, about the...
There has never been a man alive that has been a bigger warmonger than this guy right here. Now, this is the same guy that sometimes the United States has to be bombed into going to war. Remember that? It's the same guy. So now we know that in 1990, Benjamin Netanyahu is actively campaigning for us to go to war in Iraq. You know, so check this out, though. This is something I want you to keep in mind. In 1990, apparently our media was not scared to criticize Israel, right? What changed? What changed? It's frustrating, isn't it? I mean, we've got, of course, I think everyone's probably seen the Fox News clips where they were actively looking into Israel back then. We're talking about Amdocs, right? The whole Amdocs thing and the moving company that they had. Crap, what's the name of the moving company? Someone in the YouTube comments, what's the moving company? Anybody? There's too much of a delay. I can't remember. But anyways, got the moving company. Of course, we had these art students that just were infiltrating. So they were selling cheap art, and they're infiltrating the CIA, the FBI, the DOJ, all these really high up places. It's absolutely bizarre. But anyways, so yeah. This is very fascinating, and some of the guys in the comments are talking about. We're going to get to that, guys. That's really the ultimate narrative that I want to set tonight. Is that hold on? Let me transition back over. Ultimately, that's the ultimate narrative that I want to set tonight. Is that what we learned from 9/11 is the very nature of the people that we're dealing with. I think the more we're going to go into tonight, I've got some more stuff I want to show you guys. The more we go through this, I think, as we figure out that Israel may not have necessarily been entirely behind it, right? We don't know for sure. I'm not going to make the claim tonight that I know specifically who was behind it, because I don't know for sure that it was necessarily one-dimensional. Again, our media at this time was not above, or Israel was not above criticism to our media at this point in time. Of course, that's totally changed, right? Since 9/11, I think we've seen a massive shift in what is acceptable and not acceptable when it comes to Israel. I think that's one of the repercussions we've seen since 9/11. So that should maybe give you some insight right there. However, there's just I don't want to make any wild claims. I think there's multiple parties possibly involved here, not just Israel, because even there had to be some activity even from the United States government itself. The United States government had to be involved to some extent, right? Of course. And of course, that brings into the entire question the Pentagon. What happened at the Pentagon? Well, we know that there was, $2.3 trillion that just happened to come up missing. So a plane happens to hit the exact room that held all the evidence for that. How convenient. Wow. Let's just keep handling these things. So,
yep. See that video I posted in admins. There's if you look on YouTube, there's a guy called Larry Silverstein. If you type that into YouTube, new WTC7 designed in 2000. And so he's talking about, we want to build all these new buildings here. So isn't that weird?
Let's go through Larry. Let's talk about Larry Silverstein here real quick. I'm going to pull up an article here real quick for you guys, and we're going to go back over to article view here so we can look. Oh, hold on, let me pull this up. This is from Wikispooks. And so, as we read through this, I am not necessarily saying that Wikispooks is a completely reliable source of information, but I don't think there really is anything such as that. I don't think there's such a thing as a completely reliable source of information. But what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself as we read through this, what if these things are true? And maybe you can go through, if you've never heard these things before, maybe you can go through, and what I want you to do is just go through and do your own research. And I think Cliff would agree with me. We don't ever want you to just absorb what we tell you and believe it. What we really want to do is just spark thought in your mind to where you'll ask the right questions and go searching for the answers yourself.
Yep.
So let me transition over here. Let's look at old Larry Silverstein here. Larry Silverstein is a Jewish-American businessman from New York. Silverstein obtained a 99-year lease on the entire World Trade Center complex on the 24th of July, 2001. The towers were in fact close to worthless, being filled with asbestos, yet Silverstein felt a compelling urge to own them and took out specific insurance against attacks of terrorism. Wow, I mean, this dude is a freaking genius. He knows just the right moves to make here. I mean, damn, he ought to get a job on Wall Street. Silverstein had breakfast in Windows on the World restaurant located on North Tower, 107th floor every morning, but broke this routine on the morning of the 11th of September 2001. Silverstein's two children, who also worked in the World Trade Center, were also absent from work that day. Larry Silverstein was paid $4.55 billion in insurance money as a result of the destruction of the World Trade Center complex. He also sued the airlines and airport security, seeking $12.3 billion in damages. That is rich. And we're gonna get into that a little bit later. That's probably some grandstanding right there. Just show, we're going to sue the security company that was actually Israeli owned. So seeking $12.3 billion in damages, though his ultimate payout after a 13-year legal struggle was just a measly $95.2 million. I mean, just only $95.2 million. Silverstein was a personal friend media magnate, Rupert Murdoch. And if you guys don't know who Rupert Murdoch is, Cliff, I don't know if you do or not, but he's the guy that owns Fox News. And former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Haaretz reported that he was such good friends with Benjamin Netanyahu that he spoke with him on the phone every Sunday. So, yeah, very, very interesting guy. And of course, just based on this article right here, it's not as if we can make any definitive conclusions, but it definitely brings up some questions for us, don't you think?
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's so many things when you look into it that are highly organized and well planned. That seems to be a pattern there. It's incredible, of how it's like a dance almost to them. They plan it all meticulously, make it look convincing. But you notice it's sort of got a Hollywood aspect to it. You know, it's dramatic. It's not real when analyzed, but it's, you know, it's dramatic. It's Hollywoodized. It's and then they put it on the news. Of course, that's where everyone gets the info, and that's surreal in itself. Oh,
Well,
yeah, that's incredible.
So, in reality, anything, if a event is orchestrated and designed to tug at your emotional strings, then of course they need it to be very cinematic, right? They need it to affect you in that way. So it needs to be cinematic. And you can even bring that down to, if you think about it, what are the odds that the one and only plane that does not make it to its destination just so happened to be going to the White House? The one building that was holding actual criminals is the only one that was not hit. Go figure.
Yeah. And then isn't it true, I haven't looked into the facts of it, but I'm sure there will be, that they were doing a practice run for a terrorist event that was similar to what happened.
Yes, it was scheduled for the next day. Yeah. Yeah, and how many times do we see that? Again, I don't want to make claims, but it's quite the coincidence that we see so many of these times where there's some sort of FEMA training, or training that's going to go on the next day or the day before or the day of, and then the very event that they're training for happens in real life. It just seems like such a bizarre coincidence. But,
yeah, and then also the aspect that before this happened, America itself was a super fortress. You know, they had super tracking back then. You know, military defense. Where were they? There's a lot of people questioning that the plane turned around at this time, and it took them over 20 minutes to act, and they said we could have got F-16s in the air in 10 minutes, easy.
Sure.
So,
yeah, it's very difficult to accept the fact that it was all just one big ball that was dropped, right? Everybody involved just dropped the ball, all the way starting at the beginning with the intelligence, right? So Israel supposedly comes forward and says, we have information that says that you're going to be attacked sometime within the next 30 days, but we're not given any useful information, right? But I don't really buy that story whatsoever. Maybe they did come and tell us. They probably told us when they planned the whole damn thing out. Hey, you're going to get attacked. That was what they meant was, this shit's when we planned it all out. But let's look here real quick. World Trade Center security. Nothing too definitive here, just something else to maybe bring in some questions, right? Because if the World Trade Center was actually taken down by controlled demolition, if those buildings were all taken down by controlled demolition, and I think they were, somebody had to have had access, right? So one of the main things they like to do is they like to say, what do you think, people just snuck in there in the middle of the night all wearing black and no, of course not. We're not stupid. We're not. I know they seem to think that we're all just naive idiots, but of course that's not the case at all. No, somebody would have had to have had access to these buildings for a very long time. This would have taken a long time, and furthermore, it would have had to have been somebody that no one really would have thought twice about seeing there. That everyone would have assumed that they were supposed to be there, right? Well, what better than World Trade Center, the World Trade Center security? So let's read this. The second crucial aspect of control was that of security of the World Trade Center complex. This was required to provide unquestioned access to strategic areas of the buildings for the purposes of rigging explosives in the period prior to the attacks. After the 93 World Trade Center bombing, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey gave control of the security of the World Trade Center to Kroll Incorporated in a $2.5 million upgrade contract. The owners of Kroll at the time were Jules Kroll and his son Jeremy. That's unfortunate. I'm better looking, dude. Sorry. So the managing director of Kroll at the time was Jerome M. Hauer, who ran Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management from 96 to 2000. He is the key individual that pushed for the office to be placed in Silverstein's World Trade Center Building 7. So, the only real major thing here to pay attention to is that both of these guys are, of course, Jewish. Now, I hate to just say, of course it's a Jew. I don't like going down that road. I don't like just, saying, oh, look, it's another Jew. I'm not that guy, okay? Just because someone's a Jew does not make them guilty. But in this particular instance, we know that somebody had to have access to this, and the fact that they are Jewish leads me to believe that they're much more likely to have, been involved in helping this. Of course, they had interest, right? I mean, most Jews, of course, have a very high interest in Israel and Israel's best interest. Not to mention the fact that this same company was also given access to the security after an attack on the Sears Tower. So it's something very strange there. I'd like to go into more research on that myself. That for some reason, when these major buildings get attacked, this Kroll Incorporated seems to come in right behind them. And on 9/11, I don't know. I want to speculate here, but after 9/11, I don't know if you guys know this, but they actually also evacuated the Sears Tower as well, with anticipation that potentially that building could have been attacked. And if I'm not mistaken, these guys would have also have had security over that same building. So the next big thing here, Cliff, do you want to add anything to that before I talk about airport security?
Not really. You're going quite well. There's a lot to talk about, but you're on track. Yeah, sweet.
Okay. Sorry, man. I know I'm just putting out dry information right now. I know. This one's fascinating. This one's a little bit more fascinating. Airport security. This, I really want you to wrap your mind around this and really consider this. This is a big deal. And I am reading the comments. Tongue speaker, yes, there was a major elevator renovation that took place during that summer. Yes, there was, and that would have given them access as well to the core columns of the building. So it was at the time, this elevator renovation was massive. This wasn't just a small deal. I mean, this was a huge ordeal to have, and like I said, it would have also given them access. So we've got kind of two elements here. We've got the security company that would have had access to the building pretty much constantly, all the time. And of course, we had this major elevator renovation that just happened to happen right before 9/11. Now, again, these are just things that we're saying could be, right? I'm not saying definitively that, the elevator company, was involved, or that the security company was involved. We're just putting out facts to ask questions. Okay. So the airport security, this one's very, wrap your brain around this. The third crucial aspect, of course, of control to be established was that the security at all of the airports from which the hijacking flights would originate, passenger screening needed to be handled by controlled operatives so as to allow certain people and items, i.e. weapons, onto the planes. The company that ran airport security at all three airports where the alleged hijackings originated were Hunsley USA, a wholly owned subsidiary of ICTS International and owned by Ezra Harel and Menachem Atzam, both Israeli Jews. The company was run by experts in the security and intelligence field, Israeli intelligence, that is. Most employees were ex-Shin Bet agents. It is not credible that this company, which ran security at both Boston, Logan, and Newark airports, was so slipshod as to allow 19 Arabs to board 4 different planes with box cutters, mace, and even a gun. So, I mean, really, what are the chances? Well, it's all a coincidence, guys. Don't look at this. It's no big deal. It's the Arabs. It's the Arabs. Don't worry about it. It was Osama bin Laden. He did it. Yeah. We've been telling you that since the 90s. Why aren't you believing me?
But doesn't the Bush family have interests in the bin Laden family as well? That's just another aspect.
Go further. Are you talking about their previous relations before 9/11?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I looked at a lot of this stuff years ago, as a lot of people did. It's been a long time, and but I'm just bringing up things I remember. A lot of you guys probably have looked into that. That there's business connections basically with the Bin Laden family. Yeah, that's just another aspect.
I don't know. Somebody hold on to that, because I don't know. Don't pretend that I do. If somebody has that information, once we get over to the public discourse section of our podcast here, if somebody has that information, please share that, so that question is not left unanswered. That'd be great.
Yep.
Let's see. Okay. Now, Cliff, you are a brilliant man. What I want you to do is to try to figure out how this could have happened that would not lead to, at bare minimum, Israel knowing exactly what was going to happen. Okay? I want you to debunk this if you can. Somehow. I want you to be devil's advocate, and I want you to debunk this. Can you do it?
Okay, well then it'd be simple. You'd go with the official story.
Well, no. This is what I'm going to tell you here. Is have you ever heard of the story of Odigo?
No.
Okay. Nope. This one's going to get you. We're just going through some of the stuff, man. This is fascinating. Israeli instant messaging company Odigo admitted that 2 of its employees received instant messages warning of an impending attack 2 hours prior to the first plane hitting. Haaretz reported that the workers informed the company's management, which immediately contacted the Israeli security services, which brought in the FBI. Micah Macover, CEO of Odigo, stated that, get this, it may just have been someone who was joking, and turned out that they accidentally got it right. Of course. They were just playing, guys. They were just joking around. Shit, who knew that there would actually be planes to hit the fucking tower? I mean, hell. What the wow.
Yeah, the excuses are so flimsy. That's the crazy thing about a lot of these things, these false flags, if it is a false flag. Is they're flimsy. Like, the excuses are not even adequate. It's like a child lying to the parents or something. So it's and I think that's because of the overwhelming connection between all the parties that are involved, which is an international scene basically that operates through Israel, America, Britain, and the whole World Bank, etc. I mean, that's my big forte, is looking at the World Bank and the scene that it controls the world with money. So they can kind of put out simplistic little answers in your face and laugh about it, because what are you going to do about it? That's
well, how
that's
many
the thing.
People
even
at this time, right? Yeah. At the time of this, how many people even knew anything about it? At best,
Yeah.
they probably had. Well, we know for a fact that at least some of our media was still not scared to question Israel on these kind of things, and so they probably would have been the only people paying attention to something like this. We didn't really have the internet back then; it wasn't a big deal then.
Sure, and it's so overwhelming. The amount of interconnections, like you're pointing out here, that lean to an international scene. Like the whole world is involved straight away. As we got closer to the year 2000, the globalization thing stepped up. I mean, it was only back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s that all the factories in the West were going to China. That's a big part of this globalism. So. So we've been slowly drip into the idea of internationalism, and so it's in fact real, with the technologies, internet and military technologies, satellites, etc. So all of that fits together, and the people accept it. That it's the whole world has to act now on terrorism. Are we in? And then you've got the United Nations. They'll say we are in. It's a big stage play, and it's creating a conglomeration of agreement with these world leaders to say it's now war on terror, which is multiple meanings for that. I mean, war on terror. So you got a war on the um, you got a war on the byproduct of war, because
Sure.
war's byproduct is terror. So we've got a war on terror. So it's another double think, flip flop. Terror could mean Earth too, terra firma.
Well, it's almost a reverse tactic too, though. If you think about it, there's a lot of groups. Um, so let's use for an example a militia, right? Let's say a militia decides to form, and they're saying, well, what kind of name should we have? One of the options that they have is to not have a name at all, because how do you go after a group of people with no name? What do you even call them, right? It's very difficult to identify a group that has no name. So when you use something so vague as the language of a war on terror, well, who exactly are we at war with? A war on terror? Who? I mean, who falls under that category? Who are we talking about here? So
Yeah,
it's I think that was intentionally designed that way to confuse the people, because hell, we didn't even know
exactly.
who we were going to war with. Shit, we went to war in Iraq. There was nothing going on in Iraq. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
Yeah, it's extremely dangerous situation by
Mm-hmm.
the way that the world works as legality, that the legalisms of words that go through government nationally and internationally. We know that they can stretch the meanings. I mean, just look at democracy. What is that?
Right.
I mean, there's a million types. It's been around forever, but it's like, what is it? And they'll just keep stretching the definitions or amending the definitions. That's the thing. So I know it's really shocking. I mean, someone posted in the chat, and I put a link up for him as well. There's a good talk from Bill Cooper. Some of you may or may not know him, and he talks about the beforehand of organization before 9/11 too. So maybe we'll put that in the comments or something as well.
Yeah. 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 That'd be good. There's so much to really look at when we get to talking about 9/11. It's
There is.
it's
Yeah,
well
it's
because
incredible. Yeah,
well we when we say it changed the world, I mean, we mean that literally. It changed the world for everybody. I don't think anyone's life was not impacted. I mean, when we look at the things that came afterwards, we look at the fact that the Patriot Act came in, and now you have the NSA that is just monitoring everything that we do. And furthermore, we also have private companies like Amdocs, which is, of course, another Israeli company that was monitoring everything that we were doing. And we know that because of the Patriot Act, the NSA suddenly decides it is perfectly okay to send all of our raw, unfiltered data over to Israel. As a result of 9/11, these are the things that have happened, right? We've lost civil liberties. We've suspended.
yeah, and I mean,
Go ahead.
yeah, and the overall scene of it, or the overall thing they're saying to everybody that maybe isn't in their group, is you're not presumed innocent. We're all now guilty.
Yes.
You're all now potentially guilty,
Yep.
and we've got to now monitor you. I mean, we got all our airports too. The whole world got all the airports all changed. Now we've got to go through scanners and all that. And you notice they haven't really relaxed it. I mean, there's been no big major scene anymore. Have they?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they relax all these laws now? Why aren't people questioning that?
Right. Right. Well, because it was never designed for that anyways. And they knew that. I mean, of course they knew that it was never designed to prevent terrorism. I mean, how many acts of terrorism has the Patriot or the Freedom Act prevented? None that I know of. Last I checked, it was literally none. And we've had acts of terrorism with them in place. So we have more censorship now than ever before. We have more monitoring and censorship, I should say.
Yep.
And
then
we're still having plenty of terrorism.
And then the definition of the word terrorist, as I was saying before, you got terrorism, war on terror, but you also got the word terrorist, and legally terrorist can be stretched. They even people that were finding legal remedy to keep their privacy, basically, were being called terrorists all of a sudden because the government couldn't control them. So that was another side that happened. So, and they'll keep stretching it. You're a terrorist. I mean, you're getting the mental illness thing coming up in a lot of countries, all simultaneously now. So now, oh my God, there's a crisis in mental illness because of the war on terror and the tyranny and all the being watched and spied on. And so now we're going to have to vet children and I think they're doing this in Ireland, a thing called GERFEC, another topic, where they screen children for mental illness. And what is mental illness? Well, it's whatever they
Right.
don't like. It's
Right.
whatever they don't like. So then
Sure.
if you don't fit within the conformity, you're now a terrorist. Like, it could easily be that.
Of course. Yeah. In fact, there's a lawsuit. Pennsylvania, I believe it was. Was it the state of Pennsylvania just filed, or the NRA just had to file a lawsuit against? I believe it was Pennsylvania. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. They declared the NRA to be a domestic terrorist organization. So if you are a pro Second Amendment lobbyist group, we have states in the United States now that will declare you to be a domestic terrorist organization. Talk about redefining words.
Yeah, exactly.
It's bizarre.
So
Man.
it's yeah. I mean, but a lot. I would encourage people as well, look into people that have studied these big international corporations before 9/11. Just look at what they did plan. Look at what they've done. Look at the people that have studied this. Bill Cooper's obviously one of them. There's not that many that are really skilled in the gathering of knowledge of the international cabal, you can call them. Alan Watts, another one. He was liaising with Bill Cooper. He was aware of what was happening too. And in his statement, he said, when he saw this 9/11 thing happen, he said the hardest thing for people to do is to hold on to their sanity from now on, because he already knew the plan. He already knew something big's coming up. A lot of people that were researching it. There was a thing where Bill Cooper said the media was already hyping up Osama bin Laden, saying, "Oh, we're after him. We know he could be potentially dangerous, and we've got to watch out for him." And I remember that too in the news. We even had it in our country. So
let me play this clip for everybody since we're talking about him again. I want you guys to hear this. Cliff, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not. Are you still watching it live on YouTube?
Sure.
Okay. This is Dick Cheney admitting that there was no evidence to support the fact that Osama bin Laden had anything to do with 9/11.
We've never made the case or argued the case that somehow Osama bin Laden was directly involved in 9/11. That evidence has never been forthcoming.
Really now? I mean, so if Osama bin Laden didn't have anything to do with it, who did? They never gave us that, did they? That's why we had a war on terror. Who just war on terror?
You're asking too many questions.
I know.
That may qualify for terrorism.
Well, that's why they're wanting to call conspiracy theorists, quote unquote, terrorist, domestic terrorist. Here in the United States, anyways. I don't know. That's a thing. That's a thing now.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I suppose that leads us into the next question is, since we've learned all this about 9/11, how can we prepare our minds to preemptively spot these things out in the future? I believe that information that we have now, the platforms that we have now, has made it much more difficult. I think we've seen quite a few attempts already. I think we've seen quite a few of these attempts in Syria. They want war in Syria really bad. We've back when there was chemical weapons being dropped in Syria, supposedly Assad was chemically attacking his own people. I think we got really close. In fact, I would almost be willing to say that Russia might have prevented World War III, or something pretty damn close to that. At least war in Syria, with
sure.
some of the information they gave us on terrorist groups, basically making a false flag attack in Syria to stage and make it look like Assad dropped weapons, because we were ready to just go and bomb the shit out of Assad, and we were ready to go. But I think Russia put some information out there. So what can we do you think, Cliff, to spot these things out preemptively and alert the public and say, hey, look, this isn't what it appears to be?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I was doing when the Syrian thing, we don't want to maybe go off too much topic of 9/11, but just quickly on the Syria thing that happened recently in the last couple of years, I've studied a lot about the relationships, at least the shop front, what they're telling us about Russia and Syria, and their relationship commercially, right? And then we know that Russia's got big ports in Syria, etc., that are provably, real. So that doesn't mean that they're not all working together. That's my assumption. And so I watched with bated breath the news as when the so-called Assad rebels and pro-Assad or whatever. I mean, the first thing I noticed is that they changed who was rebels and who was Assad supporters. One minute he's the rebels, next the others are the rebels. So they definitely change sides, which is what they do in a lot of war, and they call it the fog of war, of course. But what I was interested in is when it started stepping up, and the US was putting more troops in, and there was a lot more airstrikes. There was no cruise missiles or anything, but it was stepping up. I thought, what's Russia going to do? Like in the stage play theater of war, where so-called Russia's the enemy of the US, which behind the scenes it probably isn't. What are they going to do? Are they going to, because nobody wants World War III. So what are they going to do though? Are they going to, because on the international scene, they have to save face, they have to, no country, especially a superpower, wants to look weak, so they have to kind of do it strategically. So it was like a dance again. But by looking at it, Russia did not, like if you think about the logics of war and the potential of if Russia was this big enemy that the media paints it to be, we theoretically should have been at war with Russia by now. But it was such a good dance that some of you guys remember. Russia fired a whole bunch of cruise missiles into an air base in Syria. And that was serious stuff, man. I mean, he's Syria. And so you think, hang on a second. Russia has a commercial relationship with Syria. What the hell is it bombing its airbase for? Well, it's simple. They want reconstruction. Let's bomb a few old shelters and rebuild it again. So this is what I think's happening. I think that they demolish things. They have their international corporations that are ready there to rebuild. Like in Iraq, there was Halliburton, which was connected to Cheney, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was the CEO of Halliburton for 5 years before he became vice president. Pretty common knowledge, I'd imagine. Probably everyone here knows that. But yeah, Halliburton was, well, yeah, like you said, we don't want to get off too much of a tangent, I suppose, going down to the military industrial complex and all that stuff we'll cover in other videos. But it's so hard not to talk about those things because, again, those things are direct results of 9/11. Almost everything that we tend to talk about, if we're talking about Middle Eastern affairs right now, if we're talking about the military-industrial complex and Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, all of this, hell, even Trump being in office right now is probably in some way a result of 9/11. We can almost wonder what an alternative reality might have looked like had 9/11 not happened. And we don't need to go down and speculate on that. But I would say, for example, I think if we learn their methods, one thing we know for sure is that their methods have not really changed, right? So even if we just look at the Benjamin Netanyahu, right? He warmongers. He tells you this is, these people over here have bad things, and if we don't do something about it and we don't kill them, well, they're going to kill you first, right? That's just the time-old tactic, and it's a page right out of the Roman Empire. It's the same old thing, Roman Empire, barbarians, yada, yada, yada. These people over here have weapons of mass destruction. If we don't kill them, they're going to kill you. Right now, that's Iran. And, Benjamin Netanyahu right now is making some big moves. He's saying if he gets reelected, he is going to annex the Jordan Valley, right? I don't know if you guys caught that or not. I'm sure if you guys follow Middle Eastern affairs, you have. I would not at all be surprised to see some of these false flag attacks, but of course Israel, I think if you follow Israeli news on a daily basis, they have what I believe is probably false flag attacks on a daily basis. I mean, that's pretty common par for the course over there. It's just a daily false flag attack of the day, and then they justify dropping more bombs on Gaza. There you go.
Sure. I mean, a false flag attack is so easy. All it needs is agitation. to create. And this is, I think, like some of you've heard Max Egan, and I agree with a lot of he says, where he's saying a lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater and they think, oh, everything's a false flag. But it doesn't have to work like that. All it needs is an agitation to cause chaos, and they can see the chaos happening. And they can easily monitor what's happening with all the new technologies. And so as long as there's agitation, that's what matters, you know. And the key, like one of the key guys behind all this would be Machiavelli, you know, and Niccolo Machiavelli in our time. He wrote The Prince and the Art of War, and he's like a behind the scenes priest guy who knew how to control wars and things like that, you know. So you know, controlled wars are nothing new, you know. They seem to have been like that for a long time. It's part of empire building. And so all they need to do is agitation. And you could have a legitimate crazy guy do a shooting or do a bomb or whatever, and they'd say, oh, well, it was bound to happen. But then also, having said that, a lot of the time they'll want to keep so much control on the situation that they have to actually get a shooter or a false flag or whatever, you know, very tightly knit done.
Sure.
But I wouldn't say they're all false flags. They don't have to.
You can still capitalize on a bad event without it being orchestrated yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you something about that. What? So in your mind, just maybe think back on this, right? Like you said, this only takes a little bit of agitation now for us to get into the events that we have with the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, et cetera, chasing terrorists all over the world. Shit, we were in South Africa at one point in time. I was on a ship, had to cross the equator and go to South Africa myself, so I know I was there. It's an observation that I have made is that it took 9/11 for us to dedicate to a war like that then. I am not sure that it will take such a large amount of agitation now. I believe that what I see and what I observe anyways, just based on what I see, is that the people that were pre-proposed, you know, maybe were more likely to become truthers are very, very deep into it and have probably became further in knowledge than they ever have. But on the flip side of that coin, the general population has sunk so deep in cognitive dissonance that I don't really know if many of them will ever even approach waking up to this kind of stuff. So
sure, yeah, and plus with the a lot of new taxes in a lot of countries, which is putting burdens on families, the fact that men and women are working, and even the children a lot now, because everyone needs more money, and the technology of distraction with all the new technologies and that, all of this stuff keeps people, and probably even including ourselves to some extent, distracted. So yeah, it's part of this whole technique of propaganda is to change the environment. You know, propaganda isn't just words and that; it's actually changing the environment that affects the creature in the environment. You know, so they definitely know all this. So this is why it's so hard to say, like even these days, if you don't have a good foundation on these things, on the potentials of how they work things internationally, then it's easy to get lost now, because the propaganda, literally like news clips or words or opinions from experts, are so vague. They're double speak. They're sometimes totally backwards, you know, to the point of being wrong on its head. You know, they're totally wrong. And I look at the comments of some of these articles, and people say, you know, at least a lot of the percentage still, people are saying, piss off, this is rubbish, absolute rubbish. So, you know, we're being fed the last few years a lot more rubbish in the general media, and stupidity and total lies. So us older people can pick up on that and bitch and complain, but nobody's really doing. Yeah, and nobody's really doing anything. And the people that are in the system making this happen, you know, at the higher levels, they're happy, they're paid, their families are sussed, they don't care, they're just doing their job. So this is the matrix. It's very difficult.
There's a problem.
Yeah.
Do you read or watch any U.S. media yourself?
Hell yeah, yeah. I
Oh, do
watch
you?
as much. Yeah, I watch all kinds of countries I can. I look at the France situation. I
Yeah.
look at the Ukrainian situation. I watched that when that erupted. I watch Russia. I've got contacts with people in business with that know a lot with the Ukraine and Russia too. Um, what do we got? Hong Kong is another hot point. You've got Kashmir, which is kind of playing games now. So, you got a lot in the Middle East, of course,
Yeah.
all the time. But like say people looking at where is the US military now under Trump? It takes time to get the truth out. You have to weigh up all the articles and what you hear from people legitimately, say in the military, say, yeah, we've pulled out now. So the media is so bad, as I said, that it's hard to make sense of if anyone is doing anything. Well,
I don't.
1 minute they'll say we're pulling troops out. The next they say sorry, they're going to be there another year.
Well, but I mean, I think that's the wars that we're in right now are directly parallel to the never-ending wars that George Orwell talked about. I don't believe that we have ever had any intention of ending these wars, not even in the least bit. I'm pretty sure that we've always designed, just to continue on with war.
War is commerce.
Right? No, but what I wanted to talk about the media, though, is that in the U.S. anyways, for one, I hate to even call it news. I don't want to call it news. It is a form of media. But the mere fact that probably the majority of Americans could tell you all about this new iPhone that came out. They can probably tell you all about all the features and benefits, everything there is to know about this iPhone, but probably couldn't tell you the first damn thing about what's going on at the Golan Heights or the war in Yemen. Couldn't tell you shit about it. And that's because our media doesn't even touch this stuff. They don't touch it. They don't cover it even a little bit. They could at least lie about it, and then people might actually know about it and go look for themselves. They don't touch it, period.
Exactly. And
At least
I know, and that's another problem. Yeah, it's a selective cherry picking media where they give us now only what they want us to see, and that's incredible. So a lot of truth is out there. I've seen memes they post, and it's like they're starving in a desert or thirsty in a desert, going, "Give me truth," because it's so hard to find now.
I'm having to pay $13 a month right now for a subscription to Haaretz because they put out articles every day. Some of them are quite opinion and biased, but they give great intel, great information on what's going on in the Middle East. It at least lets you know what's going on over there. RT News is not bad. They're not bad, but I think I equate them on many, many ways to, just mainstream media as well. But RT News is making a fool of MSNBC, CNN, all these guys. Sure. I mean, they're just putting them to shame.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as long as we're critical thinkers, we stand a chance. If we start to waft off into la la land, then there's a danger we'll be taken away. But hey, here's a quote from George Orwell. This is a good one about war. This is George Orwell, 1949. He wrote this in his book 1984. And he says, the war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. Hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. And they obviously go together. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects. And its object is not the victory over either Eurasia or East Asia. This is where they used to change sides all the time. But to keep the very structure of society intact. So what does that tell you? Yep.
So I just ordered a book, and the name of the book is, I think, The Trigger. David Icke. He just came out with this book. Are you familiar with it? It's like 800 pages on 9/11.
One of his new books.
Yes. Yeah.
I've heard of it, but yeah, carry on.
Well, the term, just the damn name of the book, called The Trigger, it really does. I think it was a perfect title. And reason I say that is because it really was the trigger for these never-ending wars. It really was the trigger for just mass surveillance, mass tyranny over our rights, our civil rights that we're supposed to have. It is what initiated everything that is impacting our lives right now. This one event, and it's, there's no telling how long they've been planning this. As well orchestrated as all of it was. When I say as well orchestrated as it was, there was holes in it, right? Of course, there's massive holes in this story. However, when you think of everything that had to go into place, I think it was almost inevitable that there was going to be holes in the story. The trick for them was not that they got the story just right. It's that they had the people conditioned well enough that it didn't matter if the story was just right. And that took a long time. I think they've been planning this for a long time. You would probably know that better than me, Cliff. You spent a long time studying ancient occult. I mean, how long back do you think this stuff's been planned out?
Probably. I mean, a thing that even proves what I'm going to say is, if you go and look at Plato, I mean, that starts at least back then. And how old's that? It's 600 BC or something. So, it goes a long way. And then go back to the pharaohs and their art of war. Same thing, a hierarchy. They'd name the slaves. They had slaves. There's a good chance these structures were built by slaves. They might have had technologies that were not given to us, which are probably simple devices that use a different form of thinking in its construction that we just haven't figured out yet because they're not showing us. At the moment, we have our culture in our time with our technologies, which is impressive. But in the old world, they had their technologies and their culture in their time, which was impressive. Like oh my God, Star Wars type shit. So that's how I see it. So because go to Egypt, go and check it out. Go and look at the carvings. Go and look at the way that they used to make these obelisks. There's evidence everywhere. So it's been going on for as far back, at least, really, as we can tell with evidence, which is really about 4000 BC.
Wow.
Beyond that, it gets murky because things are destroyed, and you're talking about ancient, say, Sumer and things like that. So
So just to play devil's advocate here, just a question. Isn't it a possibility though that that's just been a basic sense of human nature, that man has always wanted to assert power and authority over other men and enslave them for their own personal well-being? Couldn't that be just an explanation?
Of course. Families want to be families and they want to continue their family. It's nature. But where did the first family come from? What are we going to go back to the Bible? Which one?
Yeah.
Which one? And which story? And which interpretation? So, that's how I look at that. I'm not going to say anyone's right or wrong. I'm just going to go back and say, hey, how far does this stuff go back? And
to put this into perspective, though, I want everyone to consider this. At no other time in history that we know of has there ever been a time where a single group of people had the ability like they do now to feasibly control and enslave an entire world of people. We've been through history. You can go back and look at the Peloponnesian War. You can look at the Crusades, right? You can look at any time in history you want. The technology and the means just were not there for a group of people like the Kabbalah to actually assert power simultaneously over every living being on the planet Earth. It's only now that has ever existed. And it's since 9/11 that we saw that exact power being enacted on the people in the world. And it's only gotten worse since then.
Sure. And just one more thing. With regards to the Crusades, For those that think that this sort of thing is over and done with, this idea of crusades, go into Google and type into Google Bible sites, Bible gun sites, or Bible gun sites, Afghanistan, etc. So after 9/11, when they started getting into Afghanistan, there's more than one article on this, but it came out where there was a big controversy, and it was all around the world, that you know how they've got the little sight things they put on the AR-15s, and they've almost like got a hologram as a sight. They're quite high tech.
Yeah.
So it was all about that. The company that makes those, and it had on it biblical codes, Bible codes that were stamped into these guns.
Wow.
That referred to a crusading adventure. So yeah, go and check it out. Just put Bible sites and check that out. It was a huge thing, and nobody noticed it.
Cliff, I'm going to rely on you. I'm going to, of course, looking at it myself, but I'm going to rely on you to maybe prepare some of that kind of stuff for a future show.
Sure. I mean, if we get a feel for what people want to get into, or if you and I, come up with something you really want to look at, I'll go into archives and shit and try and bring it all out. I mean, as a lot of you truthers know out there, if you've been doing it since 9/11, which most people woke up in the internet, etc., you'll know that there's so much information. If you've been doing it up to now, it's like, where the hell do you go with it? And you'll also find a lot of people that you've followed that are good researchers, they tend to pet around into their own field, which is good, but then they lose the thread of this whole big matrix again. So there's much more to learn. I think there's much more to learn of what's going on. But we need to look at more of the details, some people hate this guy, but I would recommend joining this guy's site for deeper stuff too. Jordan Maxwell. He's got Jordan Maxwell Show is his website, and you can join his show, and he's got archives of all of his studies about all this stuff, the occult side of it, on his website. So yeah, we'll get some information from there even, he's got so much as well to put out there. But also, people can't handle newcomers can't handle too much. So it's a conundrum. It's like, well, what do you do? We'll give you little tidbits. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here we can't water it down to the extent that we're catering to somebody that's brand new to this stuff. I think if somebody is brand new to this stuff, we're probably not the show for them, right? We're not the channel for them. I mean, we are trying to at least have dialogue about some of the more advanced things, stuff that we're assuming that most of our listeners are at least to some extent knowledgeable about these things, and we don't just want to black pill the shit out of each other all day. So
sure, yep.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
I think this is probably a good time to go ahead and transfer over to our public discourse part of the show. Unless you have anything else you'd like to cover first.
No, I think that's good. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, for everyone that's not going to be going over to the public discourse, if you're new to the YouTube channel, check out the description of the channel. There's a link in there for Discord. You can just click on that, join the Discord server. If you don't have an account yet, go ahead and set that up. Once you get into the server, just tag one of the moderators, one of the admins. You can tag me if you want, and we'll try to get you set up where you can get into a voice chat. You can be on the next live stream. I'm going to shut this live stream down, and I'm going to start up another one. It's going to be called the 9/11 Special After Show. And that is where anybody and everybody can come into the Discord server, get in a voice chat, and we can all just talk about this thing together. That way it's a nice community chat. So if you are new to the channel, thank you for checking out the channel. If you're not and you're just returning back, thank you as well. If you guys don't mind, hit the like button. I think that's supposed to help it on higher search things or something like that. Maybe, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. That'd be fantastic as well. And what other stuff? Oh yeah, you're supposed to click the notification bell, right? I'm trying to go through the checklist of all these other YouTubers. They do these things, so I'm going to tell you to do it too. It's a call to action, is what that is. So click the notification bell, hit subscribe, all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, more than anything, thanks just for being here, guys. We really appreciate you guys coming and spending time with us, especially when we get into the public discourse. We really have a good time just having good conversation. I learn a lot from you guys. So I'm very grateful for that. That's really, for me, that's the most important thing in my life, is just knowledge. That's makes me a better person. You know, you guys are making me a better person, and that's what really matters. So if you're not coming to the live show, I just want to say thank you guys again, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank you.